Welcome back to the world of bow making. Today I'll be sharing my 10 favorite bow woods, and what I like about them so much. Thank you to my awesome cousin, Marcos Topolansky Quintero, for the music in this video. You can hear more of his work on iTunes and Spotify. This list is far from conclusive, so don't take the rankings too seriously. Number 1. Hickory. They say Osage is king, but hickory bows hold more world records in flight archery. It's easier to find a straight hickory stave compared to any other premium bow wood. But more importantly, hickory is exceptionally strong and can be trusted in situations that would make other top-shelf woods fail. You can really count on good hickory, more than just about anything else. That makes it first in my book. But it's not perfect. You may have heard some bad things about hickory, though a lot of that does come from old-timey bowyers from the 1910 and 20s who were forcing it to conform to designs better suited to Osage or yew. Hickory is very stiff and shines in a flat bow. It's so tension-strong that the belly is the real weak link, and so it can suffer in a round belly design like an English longbow. Spreading out the belly into a flat bow lets it stand up to the back without beginning to buckle. I still do like making long and narrow bows with hickory, but I keep the belly much flatter than an English longbow. Even though hickory often comes in straight and knot-free staves, it can still be a lot of extra work to process. First of all, it's a very dense and tough wood to carve, but it can also need a lot of extra special treatment. They say hickory is hygroscopic. Every wood is hygroscopic, but they say hickory is a little worse, that it absorbs too much moisture and takes a lot of set. But you can manage this with heat treating and proper drying. Hickory is actually a very strong belly wood. It's just so strong in tension that it can overwhelm itself on the belly side. Heat treating and drier than usual conditions bring out more of a balance so that you can get the most out of your hickory. It can need a little extra love and care, but in good hands, hickory can go toe-to-toe with any bow wood in the world. Number 2. The king, Osage. For such a dense and tough wood, Osage is surprisingly easy to cut and split. I'm not saying it's an easy wood to work, but it's crisp under a draw knife and scrapes extraordinarily well. What really upgrades Osage to legendary status is the exceptional elasticity and compression, and the rot-resistant quality of the heartwood. You'll see 50 or 100-year-old fence posts made into bows, but only from rot-resistant species like Osage. Osage does have a huge Achilles heel. It's very hard to find a straight and knot-free Osage stave. You'll have to go through a lot of wood before you see one. If you want to buy a premium Osage stave, you'll have to pay a huge premium. The other downside to Osage is that, unlike whitewoods, the sapwood is not very good bowwood. The consequence is that you can't just remove the bark and use that first layer of wood for the back of the bow. Well, you can, but most other bowyers I've talked to agree that the sapwood performs sluggishly compared to the heartwood. The sapwood is also very prone to cracking as it dries, so it's typically removed. This all means that you have to chase a growth ring to establish the back of the bow, which is a lot more work than just taking off the bark. On the bright side, Osage doesn't typically need heat treating, or benefit from it nearly as much. So where you lose some time, at least you do gain some. All in all, Osage is a solid and dependable bowwood that is amazingly elastic in compression. It can make narrower bows than most other woods, and often survives more extreme conditions. The high density can make it suffer in longer bows, compared to yew and whitewoods. But for recurves and shorter bows, this is the good stuff. Number 3. The Toxic Queen. Of the legendary bowwoods, yew is perhaps the most legendary. They call it the cognac of woods. It's as intoxicating as it is beautiful. It's delicious to carve, but don't eat it or breathe its dust. When you make bows with it, you can get away with thicker, rounder bellies than other woods. This is the famous wood of the English longbow, but so many cultures have produced very similar designs. The huge range of designs that yew wood can accommodate is truly impressive, from brute long and narrow war bows to the much more intricate short bows of the coasts of the Americas. Like Osage, yew is incredibly rot resistant, both to fungus and bugs. They're not impervious woods, but resistant enough that you don't have to baby the wood by keeping it indoors in controlled conditions. Yew and Osage can be stored in conditions that would quickly rot a whitewood. I think this is a major component to the legendary status of Osage and yew. The bows can last generations, and the wood doesn't rot. On the other hand, the fact that Osage and yew are rot resistant has led many old-timey bowyers to the false assumption that whitewoods like hickory are poor bowwoods. If you're used to working with Osage and yew, and then you start treating hickory the same way, it's very likely to rot. I think this is the origin of the reputation of ash and elm as so-called second-string woods. They are inferior to Osage and yew if you try to treat them like Osage or yew. Whitewoods can perform alongside Osage and yew if you dry your staves without rotting them, and if you design according to the high stiffness of whitewoods. Yew wood shines for its exceptional elasticity in compression. It's quick and snappy to bend and unbend, and it can survive in bows with thicker or rounder bellies than other woods. Unlike Osage, both the sapwood and heartwood of yew can make an excellent bow. The heartwood is a bit better as a belly wood, so it's common with yew to thin the sapwood on the back of the bow into a thin backing layer. While this does usually violate the growth rings, yew can take a lot of abuse in this respect. Much like Osage, it's very hard to find a flawless yew stave. Most are riddled with knots and wiggles, which provides a huge extra challenge to the violated back of a yew bow. Yew sapwood is actually very strong and reliable in tension, but when violated across knots, it loses its reliability. Personally, I try to chase a growth ring as much as I can. The stronger the back of a yew bow is, the less incentive there is to round the belly to try to take the edge off of the back. A stronger back can stand up to a stronger belly, so the less you handicap the back by violating it, the less you'll have to handicap the belly by rounding it. Number 4. Ironwood. The name Ironwood refers to any one of many species that are harder than just about everything else growing around it. It seems like pretty much every culture has something they call ironwood. Where I live, that wood is Hornbeam, Ostrea virginiana. Hornbeam is like a tougher, denser, and stiffer version of maple. The fine-grained fibers and diffuse porous growth rings result in an incredibly fine polishing wood. It shines like a white bone, and can be smoothed to a finer finish than other woods. It's hard to cut the stave, split it, shape it, bend it straight, keep it straight, and tiller it. The stuff fights you the whole way, protecting its treasure. Ironwood is undervalued in the woodworking industry because it can be hard to find a straight and knot-free stave that doesn't spiral. Plus, it's just really hard to work with. If you're used to softwoods, you'll really suffer. But you get what you fight for with this stuff. Like other whitewoods, Hornbeam really shines in dry conditions, or with a heavy heat treat. If you neglect the wood, ironwood will seem prone to set, just like hickory. But with the right care, it's a top-shelf boatwood. Number 5. Elm. Elm really goes to show that good wood fights you back. Splitting elm is like getting a crocodile's jaws apart. Its interlocking fibers make everything a challenge. Carving elm with bladed tools takes an extra level of skill and patience. Despite the downfalls, elm is a gift from the bow gods. Although it's hard to work in some aspects, it does scrape and steam bend extremely well. With heat treating and proper drying, elm is as elite as anything. Like any whitewood, elm excels in tension. That means that you can make high draw weight bows from sapling trees. The problem with sapling bows is that the low diameter of the tree leaves the back of the bow with a very tight radius, or what we call a high crown. This concentrates the tension into one small ridge along the crown, and doesn't let the full back do its fair share of work. For some woods, this is detrimental, but elm is so tension strong that it can really take it. Even though elm can be tricky to work, you can also save a lot of work by making the bow out of a sapling, while keeping the possibility of a full draw weight. I wonder if this explains why elm was such a popular bow wood in the Stone Age, even though it's such a tricky wood to work with. Number 6. Oak. As far as I know, pretty much every oak species is a serviceable bow wood. Some of them are too shrubby for practical use, but anything you can get a good stave out of should be usable. For the most part, you can treat oak as either a whitewood or a heartwood. The underbark surface makes for a fine bag, but you can also make a bow out of pure heartwood or any combo of the two. Oak species are usually sorted into red and white species. Red oaks have pointy leaves and white oaks have round ones. White oak also has sealed pores, while red oak has large, wide-open pores that you can literally use as a straw. This is why you can make boats and wine barrels out of white oak, but not red. As far as bow making goes, white oaks are usually a bit tougher, but red oak is a perfectly fine bow wood. It's probably the most ubiquitous hardwood available in the US, so it's no surprise that red oak boards are the most popular choice for new bowyers, especially in the US. Check out my board bow tutorial if you'd like to go down that rabbit hole. You can also use many other species for the same design, such as maple, hickory, ash, elm, etc. Just about anything you can treat like a whitewood should work. Number 7. Maple is one of my favorite woods to carve. Maple can be elite bow wood, but not all maples are created equal. In the lumber industry, maple species are sorted into hard and soft maples. In general, the hard maples are vastly superior to the soft maples when it comes to bow making. Where I live, sugar maple is pretty abundant. I try to stay away from red and silver maple, which are pretty soft. Of course, you can also make a bow out of soft maples, but you may have to adjust the design. If your stave is large enough, you can increase the width of the bending limbs, proportionally to the density. For example, if your stave is half as dense as sugar maple, make it twice as wide. If your stave isn't very wide, you can make a longer bow instead. Unfortunately, most maple logs I've split seem to have some spiral to them. For straight stave designs, I usually don't bother steaming out the twist. Instead, I make a long and narrow bow. Narrow enough that the twist isn't so bad, and long enough that the wood survives the draw stats. Like other whitewoods on this list, maple performs well with a heat treat. It makes a good longbow because of the moderate density, but keep the belly pretty flat if you can. Maple struggles with a round belly. Maple also makes good flat bows and recurves, and since it's widely available in lumber form, maple is an excellent choice for a board bow. Number 8. Ash. Ash is probably the most notorious among the so-called mean woods. We also know these as the second string or second shelf woods. It seems like ash has always been the sidekick to the more famous yew wood. Where I live, it's the sidekick to hickory. To be honest, I have a hard time using ash for bows when I have the choice of using good hickory. The last time I used ash in a bow, I chose it because it's an internationally available bow wood, which could be more appropriate in a video for an international audience. When I'm on my own, I pick hickory almost every single time. Hickory is pretty much just a better version of ash in almost every quality. But I wish I used ash more. It's a joy to work with and splits well with hand tools. Yes, it can be a bit plain Jane compared to some of the more exciting bow woods, but it has a rich history. Ash grows straight and splits amazingly well. It heat treats and steam bends well, and it's simply the best hardwood around for making shafts, whether they're for spears, arrows, or tool handle blanks. The elephant in the room when it comes to ash is, of course, the emerald ash borer. Luckily, where I live, there are several mature, healthy trees that seem unaffected by this pest. But otherwise, ash trees are dropping like flies. Often they're cut only to prevent further spread of the disease. If you're lucky enough to get tipped off about when this happens locally, you may have a lifetime source of healthy ashwood. Unfortunately, I think bowyers are better off staying away from infected wood. It might still be okay to use for furniture projects, tools, or arrows, but for bows you'll be pushing the wood near its limits, and a single bug hole could ruin the whole project. I feel similarly about using wood that fell in a thunderstorm. The free wood could seem like a godsend, but can quickly turn into a headache and a time sink. There's usually a reason that a tree falls in a storm, and the others didn't. After some bad experience with storm-down wood, I now only look for the strong and healthy ones. And since I avoid killing strong and healthy ash trees, I don't get to work with the wood too often. Number 9. Hornbeam, also known as blue beech. American hornbeam is an understory tree with little commercial value. It grows gnarled and twisted, with a stringy, almost muscular appearance. Though they're not closely related, both beech and blue beech are tough and underrated bowwoods. The problem with American hornbeam is that it can be hard to find a large, clean stave. Splitting hornbeam can be risky and often ruins both halves, either due to spiral or the interlocking grain. The back of the bow can also be a lot of extra work to debark because of the unique texture. So most of the hornbeam staves I work are saplings, with a lot of character. Rather than splitting these staves, I just rough them out, straight from the log. Like most of the members of this list, hornbeam behaves like a textbook whitewood, in that it's very tension strong and responds well to a heat treat. Hornbeam is a relatively stiff wood, but much less so than hop hornbeam or hickory. This makes it a good wood for longbows, just don't round the belly too much. It also performs well in a flat bow, with a strong heat treat. Number 10. Juniper. Juniper is the most delightful to carve wood I've ever used. The scents, sounds, and raw beauty it produces are irresistible. It's hard to get bored of the creamy white sapwood, raspberry-colored heartwood, and the mesmerizing, swirling boundary between the two. Juniper is satisfying and effortless to carve, like chomping down on a crispy wafer. It's also a very elastic wood, making it a great candidate for replica English longbows. They used to call eastern red cedar poor man's yew. Of course, eastern red cedar is actually botanically a juniper. The common name is a misnomer. The problem with junipers in general is that they tend to be a bit weak in tension. This can be remedied with a rawhide backing, or sinew backing if you have months of patience. The other problem with juniper is that the trunk tends to grow very full of knots and branches. This really goes hand in hand with the tension weakness. It's hard to find a juniper stave that has a trustworthy back. Personally, I don't push this wood very hard. Some bowyers say you absolutely must back this wood, but I've also seen unbacked warbows drawing over 100 pounds at 32 inches. You'll often hear that it's okay to violate the back of a juniper bow. That's fine advice if you do it perfectly, or if you back the bow after. I prefer to try to chase a growth ring, but that's not always easy with juniper's tight growth. Chapter 11. I thought as a bonus I'd list some runners-up that didn't quite make it to my top 10 list. These are only woods I have experience using, and the whole list is obviously biased towards my geographical location. I don't mean to suggest that the best woods happen to live where I do. These are just my favorites. If you live somewhere else, you may find that some of these woods still grow in your area. If not, there's likely something usable that does. The best bow stave is the one you have. There are so many more great options that haven't made it to this list, simply because I haven't tried them. Let me know if there are any more that you would have mentioned. I would also really appreciate it if you start a comment thread, letting others know what your favorite woods are in your area. Maybe you can help out someone who lives nearby. Thanks again to my amazing cousin for all the music, and I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, may the bow gods be with you, and may your arrows fly true.